Hello and welcome to what is going to be an additional to the capital ships video, because it seemed to be sensible to add this in, because there are lots of ships I've been talking about recently in the key ships, HMS Incomparable and the various Japanese vessels, which have really massive guns, and this has opened up the normal debate on just how bigger guns can you build. And at what time period can you really build them? Now, what's been interesting is some of the comments, and I'm gonna say now, I have picked out a particular comment. I would like it first noted that the person who made this comment, Salamin Shakia 9351, very nice comment. Okay, very well worded, and literally, I have picked your comment out because it is so well worded. Okay, so this is... you've written it, and it's better than me just writing it up there and saying some people say this, because whenever I start a video off with that way, there are people who always come back and go, who said it? And I have to start trying to figure out how to give them links to specific people's comments, and I just no, it's not me. Okay. That's a whole load of admin, which frankly, the whole reason I am the level of university lecturer I am is because I like to avoid extraneous administration and office politics. I prefer the history. I prefer teaching the students. I prefer talking with everyone and sharing the history, learning the history and passing it on. I do not like spending my days debating stupid points about what ballpoint pens we should buy. Especially speaking as someone who does everything on his computer, because I can't read my own handwriting, so I really don't give a flying hoot about ballpoint pens. Buy whichever one you fancy. If you like it, enjoy it, love it, knock yourself out with it. I really don't care. That is my entire philosophy when it comes to ballpoint pens. But no. Somebody gave this wonderful comment, and I'm going to respond to it properly in the HMS Comparable comment response video. So please note I am skipping points 1, 2, 3 completely. And I'm skipping the end bit as well. There are all sorts of things I will comment response. It's some very interesting ideas. They are, to be fair, good questions, but they're also, to an extent, some of them quite easy to point out that no, that doesn't matter, and that can be sorted out, and that's this way is the way it's going to work. But they're good questions to ask, but they're quite easy for me to answer, which is a nice thing. But also, easy of answering is relative, I suppose, because it's my area. Anyway, number 3. Nope, number 4. Get it right. Can a weapon as large and heavy as a 45 caliber 20-inch be built back then in that time? Well, my answer would be no, but I'm going to explain why, and it's not to do with this, because you don't go on... I've read online somewhere, and I know where that comes from, I think. I know which book it comes from. As much as I love my colleagues in history, as much as I say always enjoy the books, learn from them, were some historians in the probably 60s and 70s who I swear never did any manual labour in their entire lives and didn't know when some engineers were actually pulling their legs. Because I have seen this seriously written in journal articles. I think it's been edited out now, that journal article. But of various things, it's got through at various points this idea, and this is where it comes. I'm not blaming, saying it's you that's come up with this, Lemon here. I'm saying I've seen it going around. I know where it's come from in terms of academic terms. It's been there. I read online somewhere that Ellswick either doesn't have cranes that could lift as heavy, or quenching wells deep enough that it could only fit in as weapons were 40 caliber long. Well, there's 3 points here. A, Ellswick is not the only gun manufactured in the United Kingdom. So, that'd be like saying, well, let's say we have multiple fuel companies you can buy your petrol from, or I think in American terms gas for your car. Gas is supposed to be... We're not getting into that. We're not getting into that debate today. But it's kind of like turning up at Shell and saying, well, they don't stock the Shell normally in the UK partner with a company called Waitrose to run their shops and their sort of supermarket bit. And it's like turning up at a Shell with its Waitrose and going, I can't see the M&S brand of sweet and sour chicken. Why is that not here? Well, they have the Waitrose brand of sweet and sour chicken. If you want the Marks and Spencer's one, that's usually at the BP further along the road, the British Petroleum one. That's the thing. There are multiple different companies, so if one couldn't do it, one of the others could. Next point. They don't have cranes that could lift as heavy. Ellswick has upgraded its cranes by the point we're talking about in roughly 1917, 1916 when they're talking about this, and into the, later. It's upgraded its cranes somewhere in the region of 4 times in the last 20 years to deal with heavier guns coming in. And that's me basing it on a rough estimate of when they've ordered the new, bigger cranes. Not how often the very capable engineers at Ellswick have modified their cranes they have to make them stronger and able to lift more. I'm fairly certain they order a new crane when they finish tinkering around with the old one and think they can't grow its capacity anymore. So I'm not so worried about that. The same with quenching wells. Deep enough. Well, or long enough. Well, you make them longer and deeper. The original quenching wells, the quenching wells you had for the first generation of guns, going back, that went through the quenching process. We're talking back to, I think, the first generation of guns in the UK, which went through the quenching process with some sort of 8-inch weapon. It might have been a 6-inch weapon, but they were definitely not that long. They were, I think, 6-inch 30s or something like that. I could be completely misremembering that one, but I know it's something that goes back about 30, 40 years prior to the period we're talking about. Since that period, the quenching wells have had to be upgraded, lengthened, deepened many times. So, yes, those things are true, but those things are also not obstacles to new gun construction. At no point are there obstacles to new gun construction. It's just a case of admin, sort it out. It's a administrative logistical problem. So what is the real problem? What is the real problem? Well, the real problem comes when you start to look at these things. Okay? These are 13.5-inch 45s and 15-inch 42s. They are long guns. They are heavy guns. That turret has exactly the same operating criteria as that turret. Yet that turret with twin 13.5-inch guns weighs 600 tons. This one weighs 770 tons. So you've gone up 1.5 inches and you've gone up almost a third in the weight of your gun and your turret system. So, first things first, if you're thinking about estimating what a 20-inch turret might displace, if you think about it, going up from a 15-inch, that's roughly 3 1.5-inch jumps, so just keep adding on a third and you have a rough estimate. That's going to be heavy. So you're going to have to A, design a ship that can deal with that weight, deal with the force of the fire, and deal with all that weight moving around within the ship. Because again, remember, the turret moves around. That has an effect. A turret does not have a perfectly center of balance as well. They are always turret cradles, etc. always seem to be slightly off center. They can be the same design, can be offset, theoretically the same turrets built in the same manufacturing facility, put together at the same time, will have differing centers of balance. It's the way it works, okay? They won't be different by that much, but it could be 3 or 4 inches, which can be enough to move them from different sides of the center line. And then you have the fact, of course, that they don't stay on the center line pointing forward, they move around. And that all affects the balancing on your ship, which is one of the reasons why ships which are theoretically the same class can have different operating characteristics. Your next thing, and this video is all about the problems, okay? I'm not offering any of the solutions, but I just want people to understand what the problems are with building guns. And bigger guns. You've got the ship itself and all the mechanisms. You've got all the shell manufacture. But the biggest problem of all is that barrel. Not the quenching it. It's the actual constructing it in the first place. You have to design a process that is going to build you a gun which is sufficiently long enough. And sufficiently high enough caliber to be of use. Which means, realistically, 42 is about the shortest it could be. 45 is what you preferred. You can tell the Queen Elizabeths are a rush job because they are a 42 rather than a 45. 12-inch 45, 13.5-inch 45. We want to rush in and have, and I've talked about this when I did the whole video on the Queen Elizabeth class, 15-inch 42. They want to get the 15-inch in service as quickly as possible because they want to jump up and they want to do what they need for both the qualitative race with the United States and Japan and Italy and the quantitative race with Germany. Their entire plan is to go up another level in the qualitative race, but not add too much pressure on that, but to put enough qualitative pressure on the quantitative race with Germany to force the German army to squash the German navy. That's the entire British strategic plan with the 15-inch guns. And it works. The reason the German navy basically falls out of the Anglo-German naval race, when it does, in roughly 1912, 1913, is because the only way they can start getting enough money to actually compete with the British on the level they're supposed to be competing is if they start raiding the army's budget. And the army comes first. But I did say there were 3 issues. And I did. The gun barrels are the big issue. Because not just making them, you have to get the metallurgy right and the tapering right so that the gun barrel doesn't start to droop. This is actually a big problem with gun barrels, and it's actually some of the problems with some of the early 18-inch gun barrels and various other things, which is what affects and really gives you a sort of maximum size of what gun barrel you can build. When someone says to me, oh, they could have built a 20-inch for the incomparable, I think you're more likely to see an incomparable go to sea with 9 18-inch guns in 3 triple turrets than you are to see an incomparable go to sea with 6 20-inch guns. Because of the metallurgy. Because of the issues with gun barrels starting to droop. Because the fact that it doesn't matter with the rifling and all the other things you put in the gun barrel to try and give you some accuracy and some range. If you have a barrel which is literally just drooping even slightly, you can end up with A, woefully inaccurate guns, but B, affecting your range, and C, if things go really bad and you have a dud shell, or a shell which has an issue in a barrel which is already drooping, you are likely to have the shell go off inside the barrel. Which, in worst case scenario, can blow up the turret, depending on where it goes off. It could cause issues. If everything functions, if the breach mechanism and all those things function as they're supposed to, the damage is contained, you just lose the barrel. There are variances in between that which are not exactly fun either. So, drooping barrels. There is a reason why even the Japanese, who are just as wunderbar weapon as the Germans in so many ways, do not stick their 20-inch gun until their 6th circle. It's a nice dream, and on paper it's a really interesting gun. And it's kind of like a lot of those other major projects we see promised throughout history. They're always one breakthrough away. They're always a bit more testing, a bit more development away with the 20-inch guns. And the technology for it. And they never get there. Now, honestly, if battleships had continued being undeveloped into the 1950s, there is quite a good chance they could have got there. Maybe if the treaty period hadn't come in when it had come in, and they'd had 20 years of a qualitative race between Britain and America each year producing a couple of ships, which is how they usually acted with each other, and trying to one-up each other, maybe they would have got to the 20-inch guns. Maybe. But I find it highly unlikely, because on top of all this, making these guns, etc., you then have this incentive of actually being of the realities they actually use. Because as I pointed out again, the shells, everything is going to be so frigging heavy to move around on a ship. It's going to affect your rate of fire. It's going to affect your ability, therefore, to aim. Another very interesting comment I've had on this was on the Japanese ones. Basically, was going through the aim and I could see where they were going, but they were transposing it early because they were talking about basically early generations of radar and basically saying, you know, with that information fire control computer, they didn't have to do the ranging shots. And the thing is, you do have to do the ranging shots still. Even when you have the early generations of radar, even the powers which are on the second and third generations of their radar versus the powers which are on the first or second generation of the radar, even they are still doing ranging shots at the end of World War II. And even into the Korean War, they're doing ranging shots. And that's against land targets which aren't moving. Yes, they often hit with their ranging shots, which is good, but it's a land target, it's not moving. Why? There are all sorts of factors that come into play. Mostly, you've got the issue of the time delay. It's not like modern systems and modern radar guided control where, you know, you've got instantaneous information movement. In these systems, you have multiple humans in the loop, passing information from one to another. Humans! Passing information from one to another. That's not good. So you still have ranging shots. You still have ranging salvos. And 20-inch guns for me always seem to be... Again, they seem to be like the 10-inch. I sit there and listen to some of the conversation about them, and it comes down to the same brilliant on paper, perfect, you know, perfect position on paper as a 10-inch gun. As the 4th rate ship of the line. On paper, it sits there, it can do the cruising roll and the ship of the line roll. That's amazing. It's the most cost-effective ship. You know, the 10-inch gun, theoretically, you've got similar rate of fire to the 8-inch, because it's not that much bigger than it. It's got the similar level of hitting power and all these, and it hasn't. Square cube law means it has nowhere near the hitting power of a 12-inch. And the sheer weight of a 10-inch means it has nowhere near the loading and rate of fire of an 8-inch. Which is why you end up with these sort of cruiser guns 8-inch below, well, really 9.2, 9.4 inches below, depending which period you're talking about. And honestly, battleship guns are 11 inches and above. That is why you end up with that break. Because in that sort of period, area around the 10-inch, it's just not bang for your buck. And it's similar when you get to the 20-inch. And on the 20-inch, I would say, especially with Incomparable, Jackie Fisher is talking out of his hind even more than usually. Okay? They took a jump on the 15-inch 42. It was as good as it was, which was frankly amazing, out of luck. It was not in any way, shape or form ready, or at the normal point that the British would pick a gun. The British have gun development programs going on at this point, which are 16.5-inch and 18-inch gun programs. Both of them are reaching fairly decent levels of maturity. The 18-inch, I am personally fairly certain, was being matured with the idea of HMS Agincourt, the original Queen Elizabeth variant. And I am near enough as makes no difference 100% certain, but I cannot find a smoking gun of a document which proves it, that vessel was going to be an 18-inch battleship. That's the only reason I can find for them pausing and stopping her construction, considering she's being built in a yard which has built a Queen Elizabeth before. The Queen Elizabeth is as useful and not as useful as it was, and we know there were some variations in her, because small tube boilers suddenly appear, which are long lead items, but they appear and they're ready. So the only ship they could have been for, because the only one we can't find the boiler orders for is the Queen Elizabeth class HMS Agincourt. But that's a whole video on HMS Agincourt on this channel again. So, yeah, I'm certain the Royal Navy was working on an 18-inch battleship. I'm certain that. Before Furious had her single 18-inch guns, which again, magically appear. Where was the 18-inch gun program? What was that for? Oh, yeah, that we've got 3 barrels. Well, if you're building it for a 6-gun ship, like Renown's are designed for, and Incomparable is designed, and again, this is not, we all know that not the first 6-gun ships being considered. Well, hang on, you go through all designs. There's no 6-gun ship. 6 18-inch gun HMS Incomparable advanced Queen Elizabeth class looks fairly likely to me. Sits in that bracket. So we know that. The 18-inch guns. We know the 16.5-inch gun is being developed. We see it on the G3s, we see other things. And it's the 16.5-inch gun program which is fed into producing, with the interesting data acquired from testing of German guns, into the 16-inch gun program, which is if it's on Nelson and Rodney. So we can show where all those programs come about. 20-inch gun? It's paperwork. It's smoke and mirrors the whole time. So no. But, as said, I've been over the difficulties today. The difficulties are not, and I think I know which book, especially the internet feeds that one off, but it's otherwise a very good book, and it's one line, so I'm not going to get in and critique it and cause any trouble. Besides, I think that particular historian might well be dead, in which case I'm not doing a pile-on a person who can't defend themselves or make their own case back. Even the relatively small pile-on that would come from my channel, no. But it's not the administrative and logistic things of digging a bigger hole, or making cranes as heavy as they could be. Heavier. Ellswick, remember, had a 14-inch gun they had ready to go, a 14-inch 45, when they were doing the 12 inches for the HMS Dreadnought. So they had a 14-inch 45 they could have quite easily fitted onto the HMS Dreadnought. They didn't go that because HMS Dreadnought is the most de-risked, conservative leap into the unknown ever known to mankind. There are a fair number of them, but navies typically do this. They do a very conservative, a small c, not making a massive leap into the unknown. It's marketed as a big leap because they're trying all these new things, but it's actually very conservative when you look at it, because quite a lot of the technology has already been de-risked and other things. It's one of those interesting things, and interesting points. Again, and I've done videos on this, if Dreadnought had gone with the 14-inch guns, that changes a lot of things, because for starters, it's going to be a debate whether the British go up to a 15.5-inch gun next for the Orions, or whether they go up to a 16-inch gun. And honestly, whilst the 15.5-inch is the 1.5-inch jump the British normally do, they've already done a 2-inch jump, so they might go for a 2-inch jump up to 16-inch for the Orions. In which case, Queen Elizabeth could well be 18-inch gunships. If you jump along. It's an interesting scenario to get into, but it changes the world so much if you make that one change to HMS Dreadnought that we really can't predict. But the point I'm trying to make is they go for the 12-inch guns. But they had the capacity already at that time to make the 14-inch with all the quenching and all the systems in place. Usually, whatever guns you're building, you have the capacity to build the next generation up gun. And we know they were building 18-inch guns. Because they appear on HMS Furious. So, in other words, infrastructure-wise, I'm not worried about it. Metallurgically-wise, construction of barrel, I'm worried about it. Because drooping barrel is a big issue. A drooping barrel is... well, yeah. Droopy barrels are just not fun. They're just not. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found it interesting. And thank you again to Slamashikea9351 for this wonderful comment. As said, I will go through the rest of them in the comment response to HMS Incomparable, which will come out over the Christmas period. And I hope you're enjoying the Keyship series, and I hope you're enjoying all the work that's coming out of the channel recently. Take care, and have a nice evening. Oh, question before I go. I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. How do you think the world might have changed if the British had gone with the 14-inch guns for HMS Dreadnought? Actually, I'm going to make him one better, so better. 14-inch guns and 24 knots. 14-inch guns and 24 knots. And I'm going to tack on to this video now a UAD video of such a ship. Enjoy. So, before we start this lovely video, they started with Sir William Henry White, a pretty cool naval architect in my opinion, who had a lot of very successful ship designs. But B, I need to explain something. You see, I set up the vessels to fight this, and I didn't realize which version I had selected until I'd run through the practice fight to see if what happened. And then I went, well, I'm going to go with it. Because, you see, the last vessel I'd built, the most recent battleship I'd built for this particular period of the German Navy, is, well, I came up with the idea that I should, maybe for a Christmas special, I would do battleships and the dog, dog breeds if they were battleships, i.e. what battleships look like if they're certain dog breeds. And, well, this one is one of the ones which is designed for the chunk, aka the fluffy research assistant, now that the Poodle is the senior fluffy research assistant. And, yes, this, of course, is my Corgi. So, without much further ado, I will introduce you to a 14-inch gun version of HMS Dreadnought, as how I think she'd have built if she'd been using 14-inch guns and triple turrets. I just decided to go the whole hog, okay? And, the Kaiserlich chunk. Because, well, he's got a chunky behind. Here we go. Now, Royal Oak is fairly fast. She's got a top speed, theoretically, of 24 knots, but you try and actually get it to 24 knots. It won't actually let you get there. Basically, the rules is it can do 23.5 because of issues with construction, which is something which the lovely people at UAD have added in. Not necessarily the worst idea. It does represent some of the realities of things, but the fact is also most ships built achieved the speed they were supposed to, or they were sent back to the shipyards. So, if a ship was half a knot slower than it was supposed to be, there was a problem and someone's going to be made to pay for it. Especially if that was the Royal Navy involved, because then they would find very painful ways to make you pay for it. Oh. We appear to be already in range of the chunk. Oh. Finally in the misto here. Let's go have a look at the... And now you can see why she is a chunk. Literally carries... Well, she has something... She packs something in the front, but most of it's in the trunk. She is the Kaiserlich chunk. Sorry, I didn't realise, and then I thought, well, shall I rename it or shall I explain it? And I'll explain it. And I'm still not sure if I'm going to do this video, if I'm going to do the video of battleships as dog breeds. In fact, that can be question 2 for this video. If you watch the whole way through this, what do you think various dog breeds would look like if they were battleships? Okay, I have ideas for them, for some of them. I have... For others, I have no idea. I've been trying to figure out how to do a Dachshund battleship, and really it's basically long and low draft, but basically all I've got is 2 guns at either end, and that doesn't really seem fair. I'm working on it. So, if we go back to Royal Oak, who is in fine feathering form, as you can see, triple 14-inch guns, 5 of them. If this was your HMS Dreadnought, then we can all be fairly certain that the world will be very different. Very, very different. And yes, she has got 16 inches of armor, but that's because I started off with putting in the same length of belt as Dreadnought would have proportionally, and she wasn't stable. So, as I kept playing around with engines and various combinations, I went, okay, fine, what am I going to do? Added an extra 2 inches of belt armor. And she was stable enough, and she was under the point at which she jumps around so much you can't actually hit a target. And so I went with it. Okay, but that's like all of UAD. There are limitations. It's like this one has up to 15 inches of armor, and yeah, they're both. Let's be honest, Chunk has a lot of firepower. A lot of firepower, and they've decided to get very close to those 12-inch guns. But Royal Oak does have 15 14-inch guns pointing, and the Chunk only manages 12. But see, yeah, this could quite easily have been the benchmark. Yeah, I don't think the Royal Oak's going to survive long. So, the Kaiserlich Chunk could definitely have given a run for money on the Royal Oak. But one was the interesting things I was thinking about when I was actually going through the designs and after I'd realised what had gone through as an accident, was that actually, considering the options available to the Germans, if they wanted to build battleships in response to Dreadnought quickly, as they did historically, if she had been a 14-inch gun ship, well, the Germans would have had to rebuild things far more than the British, because Kaiserlich Chonk is armed with 12-inch guns. She's armed with 12-inch. Yep. She's armed with 12-inch guns. Sorry, it skipped for a second. But realistically, the first generation German Dreadnought battleships were armed with 11-inch guns. Not because the Germans were magically attracted to the 11-inch gun, and not really because they ultimately believed the 11-inch gun was just as the same as the 12-inch gun. They believed it was just as good, but it was good in different ways. But because that was the quickest and most available weapon for them to get hold of. So they could produce something quickly. So, the thing is, if Kaiserlich Chunk was the real response of the Germans to a 14-inch dreadnought, she probably would have 11-inch guns again. And at that point, that's going to just be embarrassing. You can make the case, oh, our 11-inch with its longer caliber and higher velocity is as good as their 12-inch, so yeah, you know, they match in. Our 11-inch is as good as their 14-inch, which has pretty much the same velocity, slightly longer range, and a far heavier shell. Yeah, that doesn't stack up, does it? And again, the thing is, for the Germans to develop a 14-inch gun is a lot easier. Or a 15-inch gun is a lot easier than developing a 20-inch gun. For anyone involved. If we look at the range of powers who develop guns and big guns and how they get there are a number of powers who develop 11-inch guns, 12-inch guns, 13.5-inch guns, 14-inch guns. Once you get above 14 inch, it starts to get fewer. But not that many fewer. But you look at the number of nations which actually developed working 18-inch guns, and that's dropped down. Number of nations which have deployed those 18-inch guns on ships to actually be used from firing from ships, that goes down even further. Talk about even bigger guns, well, that's just making life even more complicated. There are some very real issues with the metallurgy and the metallurgical science available at the time, and also the gun barrel science available at the time. That's all being developed as we are talking about it in this period. It's not a settled science, it's not a settled, we know what we're doing. It's we're still very much developing it. Very, very much developing it. Oh, Chunk might have a chance here. Chunk might have caught the Royal Oak napping. Because those are 12-inch 50s. And those are 14-inch 45s. A lucky shot might do that for them. Fire it was. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Of course, one-on-ones are never actually realistic. You know, if I wanted to make it realistic, I'd have to program in a whole fleet. And again, that's not really realistic, because I need to program in multiple types of battleship. Which is why, when I'm actually doing simulations and full-on tests, I use something which is based on a Harpoon. Software which sort of masks and runs over top of a Harpoon-based system. Rather than UAD. But UAD is good for the illustration purposes, and the one-on-ones are nice for me to talk over and just illustrate things. So, I'm adding that bit in because some people have been going recently, oh, you know, are you using UAD for your testing and all this? No. I use UAD for illustration and to muck around with the ship designs and see what I can sort of build. But there are limitations in UAT, but there are limitations in the graphic representation of the other system. And the fact that I don't have permission to display the graphic representation of the other system under any circumstances. So, yeah. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you liked the last of the two questions. And take care. Doodles. Here comes the chunk.